Mike Murray.
This is SNL.
SNL
By the numbers.
Numbers.
Bald Bill Burr brought back, sells snakeskin sex rock CD, Dismukes dials dad. There's the opening haiku for you. I am your host, Mike Murray. This is SNL By The Numbers, the home of SNL stats. Tonight we are covering episode 974 of Saturday Night Live, hosted by Bill Burr, musical guest McGee. This podcast is a presentation of LateNighter.com. My one and only guest, you may be familiar with him. This is like when you watch a show like The Office or something and you're like, has Stanley and Creed ever interacted? How has this guy not been on the program yet? Andrew Haskell making the By The Numbers debut tonight. How are you, brother?
I'm doing all right. They said, you know what really gets this show going? We needed a guy from the Boston area who just had a kid, who loves SNL, who loves Boston sports. And then they said, wait, that's already the host. Well, we'll double it up anyway. I don't know if we could be any more similar, and yet have not interacted on this entire channel yet until tonight. This is SNN history right here.
Yeah, you're witnessing it here live. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things I want to ask you. I've heard your voice on the shows. I think you just had your SNN anniversary and SNL Stats Days, ironically covering a post SNL Chappelle episode. Am I right about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy to think it's been that long already, but yeah, coming in and covering Chappelle after the election, and not having any idea what I was doing, in covering SNL from a podcast perspective. And it's been so crazy, kind of everything that we've built here, and being able to focus on the show from a whole new perspective. And I don't know, John just keeps calling me back, so I'll keep on showing up.
And we're glad that you are. So, I mean, give a quick, just in case, you know, for the diehard By The Numbers people, like, and you know, but talk about diehard going back. If you want to see our introductions, you got to go back 4 years. So, when did you get into SNL? Let's just open with that as the icebreaker.
Yeah, shocker. It took us about 45 seconds in this podcast to bring up Boston sports, but I have kind of two converging SNL. So I grew up in an SNL family where there were so many things from my childhood, references and quotes and stuff, that I didn't realize were from SNL because it was just like in my household. But for me personally, a huge Red Sox fan. In 2005, the movie Fever Pitch came out starring Jimmy Fallon. And as a huge Red Sox fan, I had to go see it. And I remember people being like, yeah, that's Jimmy Fallon from SNL. Which I was at the time familiar with SNL. My family watched it, but I remember actually being super heartbroken to find out that he had actually just left SNL right before doing Fever Pitch. And I had that feeling of like, man, I missed out. And that's what kind of led to me starting in that 2006-ish time frame, starting to watch SNL on my own, and really coming from that, not wanting to miss out on any cast members again. So, man, it's crazy to think, but I'm going to be heading on 20 years myself watching the show as like my own personal thing, not even a family thing.
That's crazy. And if you don't know the history of Fever Pitch, they had to change the ending because the Red Sox won the World Series after 86 years. And the whole point of the movie was that this diehard fan gets his heart broken again. And they're like, well, we can't do that now because they just broke the curse. So we gotta change this. And then Drew Barrymore, Jimmy Fallon on the field, Game 4 in St. Louis, and you know they're kissing on the field, and people in the audience and in the stands were like, "Is that Jimmy Fallon right there?"
Huge Yankee fan, Jimmy Fallon, by the way, massive Yankee fan. Jimmy Fallon on the field in Red Sox gear, celebrating Red Sox breaking the curse after coming back from 3-0 to the Yankees. I mean, what a nice little middle finger to the Yankees on that one.
Yeah, I was lucky enough too in 2013. They also beat the Cardinals in the World Series, and I worked at Fenway for 10 years, and I was at that win. That was their first win at Fenway Park since 1918. So I did not make out with Drew Barrymore on the field after, but it was a fun time. So speaking of that, Haskell brings up Jimmy Fallon and stuff. So there is a relevant on this day in SNL history. So we're going to go back in time right now.
Now, I just pop this chicken dinner in and send it back in time.
So we'll start at the beginning. 1976, season 2, Dick Cavett hosted. We got the first ever live from New York by a female cast member. That was Gilda Radner. We also had the second edition of Michael O'Donoghue's Mr. Mike's Least Loved Bedtime Tales. 1982, season 8, we had Robert Blake on, infamous episode. We had the first Little Rascal sketch, but we had seen Buckwheat 4 times prior. But what you might remember, infamous, awesome moment, Eddie Murphy's Tyrone Green goes reggae and sings Kill the White People. So I remember knowing that song as a kid, as Haskell said, coming from a SNL family and not knowing like what the context of a reggae song called Kill the White People was. I just thought it was like, an old hit from Kingston. So we also had Dick Ebersol appear to explain Andy Kaufman's absences, and then just goes on, the executive producer to bash Andy Kaufman and say he's not funny. That was back in season 8. 1993, season 19, Rosie O'Donnell host, James Taylor, musical guest. We have the first Sarah Silverman credit and the 29th and final Schiller's Reel, Will Work for Food. That was back in season 19. Going ahead to 11 years later, season 30, we had a post-election show hosted by Liam Neeson in 2004. That was the Bush-Kerry election. We got an Appalachian emergency room that night. I did skip 99. We had the Garth Brooks double duty as Chris Gaines, where this is what I want to get to, the first Boston teen sketch. So Jimmy Fallon's, Pat Sullivan, Rachel Dratch's, Denise's McDonough. They were born on this day in 99. Haskell, reaction from you.
No, ma? No. I mean, listen, I know for a lot of people, maybe those characters were a little overdone. We know those characters played a big part in Jimmy Fallon starring in Fever Pitch. Like, that's where he did kind of show off. If you haven't seen Fever Pitch, the character of the Boston teens and Fever Pitch have a lot of overlapping. But for us, coming from the area, incredible. I think it's the Drew Barrymore. I believe it's the Drew Barrymore episode a few years later that Nomar would actually appear, and it's just that's one of those sketches, much like something we'll probably be talking about in this Bill Burr episode, that people in our area of New England look around and go, "Oh, that's spot on."
Yeah, and they did do a commercial with Big Papi recently. They had Rachel Dratch appear in that. I think John Krasinski was in it and some other people, but they had Rachel Dratch come back. So it was, you're calling back as SNL sketch for that commercial. So yeah, going ahead to 2010. So we had the third hosting night from Scarlett Johansson, future Mrs. Jost, with Arcade Fire. And that was the last of the 3 Hollywood dishes with Hader and Wig. Sudeikis made his final appearance as George W. Bush on Weekend Update, if you can believe it. He was alongside Jay Farrow's Kanye. We had a digital short, What Was That?, with Andy Samberg, I think addressing the UN. And then we had the last of the Scarlett Johansson, which she, got famous for on the show early, the Mike's, Fred Armisen commercial. So it was Mike's Busteria, selling busts. So, Andrew, do you remember the other 3 items that Fred Armisen was selling with Scarlett?
Oh,
or give me one of them, maybe.
I don't know off the top of my head. My mind is racing back to everything you described. There was the most 2010 SNL I've ever heard. Arcade Fire and everything. I don't know off the top of my head what else he was selling. I'm blanking.
Chandeliers.
I should have known chandeliers.
Marble columns.
Okay.
And then fountains. And I think in that one, her husband of the time, Ryan Reynolds, appeared in that one as well.
Okay.
And then most recently, 2010, we had Jonathan Majors and Taylor Swift, season 47. So, of course, we got 3 Sad Virgins with PDD. They were still in their nascent SNL exposure, so that was huge for them. And with Pete Davidson at the peak of his, off the field stuff, because this was just following the Kim K episode where PDD made their debut with Hard Seltzer. And we also, of course, we got the All Too Well 10-minute version. Resident Taylor fan of the SNN, got a shout out to that long performance. And we also had for SNL. I mean, this is big because one of these people is still on the show. Sarah Sherman, Aristotle Atari make their update debut. So we got the Laugh and Toss 3000 from Aristotle and got the first exposure to the Sarah Jost roast. So that was on this day in SNL. So we're going to take the chicken back out of the time microwave.
Now, I just popped this chicken dinner in and send it back in time.
So that is November 13th. All right. So let's talk about Bill Burr coming back. So Andrew, just get your opinion. You know, he's from from the area. So a lot of people around the town like him. So are you one of them?
Yeah, I've always liked Bill Burr. Appreciate his comedy. Watching him do comedy, he does something really, really well that I think only a few comics, like the really great ones, can do this. And I think a lot of people try and they absolutely fail at this. He's so good at giving you some sort of really just outrageous opinion or take where you originally go, dude, what the hell what? No, I can't agree with that. And then he slowly walks you to that point. By the end of the bit, you're saying, oh, okay, I kind of get what he was saying now. And he makes it seem so easy, and it is incredibly difficult. So I think he's lasted a very long time doing that. He's kind of exploded, and I've appreciated him. I appreciate whenever he's an angry comic, and I think maybe sometimes he tries to shy away from that, especially shying away from his Philadelphia rant and stuff. I think he tries to appear more level-headed, but if anybody listen to his comedy, he's an angry comic. I've appreciated him really embracing a little bit of a sillier side and not taking himself too seriously with, these appearances on SNL, his appearance in The Mandalorian, which is awesome. Like, that's a great character that I hope comes back in the Star Wars universe. So I think it's been a pretty good couple of years for Bill Burr.
Yeah, and coming off one of the biggest shows of all time, Breaking Bad, as well. He was on Chappelle's Show back in the day, so that's my first exposure to Bill. So if you go back and watch Chappelle's Show, you can see a non-bald Bill Burr back in the day doing some sketches. He was the white guy that wasn't Neil Brennan back in Chappelle's Show. So he's coming back. So his first time hosting back in season 46. We're going to see a lot of season 46 parallels in this night, and just a lot of themes going through stats that just a lot of things kind of lined up, including, of course, the election. So that episode, we had the Mike Pence fly on the head debate cold open, where Jim Carrey really went for it, playing Jeff Goldblum as, from the movie The Fly. He was the fly as Biden. And then does that just seem like the biggest, not fever pitch, but fever dream for you, Haskell, looking back on that season?
Yeah, it just goes to show you these election cycles and these news cycles, they move so rapidly that, 20 years ago, an incident like that, a fly landing on Mike Pence's head during the vice presidential debate, would have been the thing. It would have been the thing. And for us, it was an episode of SNL. I feel like even by the time SNL got to it on Saturday, as is a theme a lot in recent SNL seasons, even by I got to that point, it was kind of oh yeah, that happened this week, didn't it? Because it was crazy. But that's just kind of and so much has happened in 4 years. You're that was only that past election. I thought that could have been 2016 or some other time, which is crazy to think. I do appreciate SNL going with, I don't know if I'd call The Fly a deep cut. I'd have to ask other people how they feel about, referring to, Jeff Goldblum's The Fly as a deep cut. I think for the general public, it might be. So I give SNL some credit for actually doing somewhat of a deep cut on the cold open like that. That took a little bit of guts on that.
And do you have any recollection of who Keenan was in that cold open? Because that's going to make you feel like time really is a flat circle because of, COVID going on. And at the end, it's live from New York from Jim Carrey and Keenan, and they're both flies on Mike Pence's head.
Was he a politician, or was it something else going on in the news?
He was Herman Cain, who actually died of COVID following like a Trump rally when that was going on, and it was controversial. And I'll have to fact check it, but I think it might have been like around that time, maybe even before that SNL. So, and like you said, it was 5 days after that debate. So by that time, everybody had memed The Fly. So getting to it, I think SNL was like, we got to do something that no one's done. Kind of like when Gerard Carmichael hosted after the Will Smith slap. And like, how do we do a sketch about this? Everyone's made every obvious and obscure joke. So they did the seat filler thing with, having Chris Redd play him and, being the people that were sitting next to Will Smith at the Oscars. So just a case of, what can SNL do in sketch form that hasn't already been done, on Twitter and the late night shows. But let's talk about Bill Burr's performance, because he was limited. So I'll do some comparisons this time to last time. So this time, 78th percentile of a host impact. So that's like the power ranking stat. So he did go up a lot. So 33% more screen time, but not surprising because he had just 5 appearances. They were all lead roles. And he had a 14-second longer monologue this time. So he didn't get a ton of help from that, but still, 7 minutes 24. So it's decently long monologue. This time, 9 appearances. He had 7 of those were leads. Some host comps based on his stats were season 49, Bargatze, season 48, Chappelle. So right off the bat, there's some stand-ups with the long monologues. And then season 48, Keke Palmer. Last season's Bad Bunny. That's a strange one. Last season's Chalamet, and last season Brolin. So right in line statistically, like the impact that Bill Burr had on the episode. Before we move on to screen time, though, I want to run through the rundown of season 46 and get Haskell's takes on them about after what was a moment that you're like, oh yeah, I mean, even if you haven't seen Chappelle's show, listeners, that like this guy can do sketch. So we had after the monologue, the new normal sketch with Kate McKinnon, which I thought was one of the best satires of COVID. Sports debate, where he was like the guy saying racially insensitive things and trying to get himself out of it. We had the Don Pauly kind of Sopranos like woke mafia sketch. Of course, the Sam Adams pre-tape. And that was really it for his sketch appearances. So looking back on that show, Andrew, was there a moment that you're like, okay, he can do SNL?
Yeah, man, everything you mentioned there is so of the times, huh? Like when you mentioned the new normal, talking about COVID, and then you have the woke mafia, like you got a lot there that just kind of encapsulates where we were 4 years ago. That Sam Adams sketch is, again, still, for somebody from the Boston area, that sketch will still be shared in Facebook circles a ton. I thought he was phenomenal in that. I thought in that entire 46 episode, he was way better than I was expecting. As I was a big fan of Bill Burr. When I heard he was doing SNL, I wasn't expecting him to kind of not take himself as seriously as he was. So that entire episode, although I do think there were some misses 4 years ago, I don't think Bill Burr is in it, and it's kind of similar to this recent episode. I don't think this was a case of the host being responsible for the misses. Like, he came across his game for everything in that episode, and kind of sold it really well. And I think from the jump in that, he has a very typical stand-up monologue, which we expect at this point when you have a stand-up of that caliber. But he didn't just then kind of retreat into playing the straight man or anything like that. He actually had some character work in that episode.
Yeah, no surprise. He did play the kind of out of place white guy in a lot of those, including the ones I mentioned, the woke mafia, the sports segment. And no surprise there. He's never a guy who's shy from self-deprecating, that's for sure. But I think that new normal one, because it was more of an ensemble piece. It was the couples around, having an outdoor wine night. Remember those folks when we were just like, we can't hang out in the house, but we can hang out outside the house. So, and I thought him and Kate McKinnon just had really good chemistry. So that was a great sign post monologue sketch that gave me confidence in him as a huge fan of him. Especially back in those days. And I saw him live at Fenway. He sold out Fenway as a comic, which was crazy. Just because Fenway has definitely gone hard into the concerts lately, but definitely not for comedy. And so that sketch for me anyway was the one that I was like, okay, seeing him work with this cast is actually like really working for me. So his screen time last time he was here was 18 minutes, 15 seconds. So of course that's low for a stand-up with that long of a monologue. But as I mentioned, 5 appearances. One of those was a pre-tape. So this time his screen time was 24 minutes, 18. So up 33%. So let's take a look at everybody else in this show. Unique thing about this graphic, it's our first episode this year without cameos other than Dana Carvey in the cold open. So a lot more room for other people, and we'll see and talk about that. So, of course, Bill Burr at the top with 9 appearances, 24 minutes, 18 seconds, as mentioned. Kenan Thompson. So if you listened by the numbers last week, me and John were together, throwback episode, and we did a whole segment on Kenan because his start this year was so slow. And so, and I sent John the stats on Sunday night. He was like, wow, vintage Kenan. And I said, that's a true veteran right there. When you get called up the media, you answer. So he had 11 minutes, 17 seconds, made his latest career first appearance on Update of the season. So this is episode 6. Every season that Kenan's been on, and this is his 22nd, he's appeared in the first episode, second, third, at latest the 5th. So he appeared this week as Willie, Che's neighbor. Bowen Yang, second place in the cast, 5 appearances, 8 minutes 47. He's on a tear right now. Andrew Dismukes, love to see him in the 3rd place, 7:41. Colin Jost, of course, more than Che, but this time because he's in the cold open as well. He was 6:29. McGee, musical guest, 6:21. So we had some less music this week. It was room for more live sketches, which is cool. Ego Wodum, she was also an Update, 3 appearances, 6:13 was her screen time. Ashley Padilla, of course, career high, 5 minutes, 9 seconds. So she's back, 4 appearances. We'll talk about her later. James Austin Johnson, 7 appearances. That's look at the highlight reel when his career is done at SNL, a 7 appearance night when you really can't appear in a stand-up monologue, musical segments. And if you're not an Update, that's kind of means you're everywhere else. So he was 5 minutes, 9. Michael Che on Update, 4:54. Heidi Gardner, 4 appearances, 4:39. Sarah Sherman, 3 appearances, 4:23. Emil Wakim, 6 appearances. That's crazy for a rookie. 4:17 is his screen time. Longfellow, 3:31 with 2 appearances, mostly in the Good Will Hunting, Beautiful Mind type of sketch right there. I feel like have you seen both those movies? They're both they're both Boston based. Cambridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based.
Yeah, and you can feel it in those sketches.
Yeah, because the score right there sounded like the Alan Silvestri A Beautiful Mind score, but everything else felt very Good Will Hunting, of course, with Jadge playing Robin Williams at the end. And of course, Longfellow's 90s hair right there. So then we had Marcello, 3 appearances, 3:22. Mikey Day, 2:56. Devin, 2:24. Will Steven, the drummer of Snakeskin, logged a respectable 1 minute 15. Dana Carvey as Elon in the cold open, 49 seconds. Jane Wickline, 48 seconds in her 2 small appearances. Steve Higgins with some voice work in that Snakeskin infomercial sketch, 8 seconds there. And then Chloe Feynman, 0 seconds this week. So, Andrew, who do you want to talk about from the Bill Burr Mk.gee week?
Let's get some, I don't want to say negatives, but I want to get some surprises towards the bottom of that list out of the way. Absolutely, utterly shocked that Chloe Feynman gets shut out. I feel like in the last couple of seasons, we haven't seen many shutouts at all. There used to be times where there was a few cast members, especially new cast members, who would get shut out, and it was so normal. And then we went, I feel like, a long stretch where everybody was at least getting in there. Shocked a little bit to see Chloe just not involved. And I also feel like, maybe we had moved past cast members being absent during the week. for other projects. That felt normal when towards the end of like 80 Bryant and Cecily Strong's run. But so, I thought Chloe Fineman was going to be have a monster season this year. So anything below the second half of that screen time list is surprising to me. And also Mikey Day a little bit. He's the guy we're used to seeing at the top of the list. He feels like he anchors sketches. He feels like he played a lot of the roles that maybe JAJ is getting now. And that's what's uplifting him to those 7.
Yeah, for Chloe, apparently was not in the building a lot that week, but was in a sketch at Dress. So, had a chance to appear, was at the Good Nights, but did not make it onto the show. So I looked up for Chloe. This is only the third 0 for her in her career. So others were season 46, Dan Levy, and her rookie year, season 45, Harry Styles. Other than that, Chloe had perfect attendance and, other than those 2 shows until this week. So definitely strange. You would expect to see Chloe, as you said, but so that's the second shutout of the year because we had no Ashley in one show and now no Chloe in this show. So some stats, of course, Keenan, highest screen time for him since the Rami Malek episode. That was season 47, episode 3. So he's over 11 minutes this week. He had a little bit higher in that episode. So a 10-minute episode for Keenan's not rare, which is crazy because that's an insanely high number. But this was the highest for a long time. And first time being cast leader since the Iowa Debris show last year. That was the last time he was, most in the cast. And Dismukes having a great run for somebody that does not play a political impression. This is his 4th highest screen time of his career. Highest was Molly Shannon 2 years ago, which I think had that long Last Supper cold open where a lot of people got some garbage time. But he's on a run right now. So again, 7 minutes 41 for Dismukes. This is his 4th highest. So what have you liked from Dismukes this year, Andrew? And does he have the potential to be a SNL star, or does he have the potential to be an SNL fan favorite? Is that a ceiling, or can he break out to the mainstream from this show?
Wow. Well, when you ask me what do I like that Dismukes is doing, here's my short answer: everything. And I've liked what he's done with everything for a long time. Like he just has a very specific type of humor, and I think he has a very specific type of humor without feeling too niche and feeling like he can only fit into a certain box. So those are the types of people that he definitely can become a fan favorite. I think he's becoming it right now. I think in the next few years we'll look back and he's going to be on that trajectory of somebody that people just love and associate with an episode of SNL. Mainstream appeal, it's so tough to predict now because, I mean, what even is entertainment? Could he have, anchored a sitcom or some sort of comedy series 7 or 8 years ago? Sure. I don't know. Do I see him doing, every comedy that's gains traction nowadays is just a drama that is a half hour long. Like, do I see him doing that? Maybe not. So I don't know, man. I'd love to see it, but I don't even thinking that far ahead. For right now, all I know is I think he's going to continue to. I think we haven't seen Andrew Dismukes' high point yet at SNL, and I also think he's the type of guy. He's got the type of humor that could break out as a TikTok sound or some sort of social media sound, which will only help him out in the future.
Early on for him, we got some Kyle Mooney comps. We got some Will Forte comps. Some of those still might be true to this day now that he's writing more and appearing in more. So you can kind of put your finger on that's a Dismukes sketch, even if he's not the lead in it. So I think he was one of the writers for that Good Will Hunting sketch where he played a supporting role. Gave the lead to Longfellow. Maybe that was just a look-alike situation, or maybe, Dismukes just wanted that role of being the janitor and getting really the laugh lines there. But Haskell, one of the reasons I love you on this podcast is because you have a way of kind of pinpointing, what is the je ne sais quoi of comedy type. So if someone had never heard of Dismukes or saying, "Oh, I don't even know who's on the show anymore," SNL hasn't been good since Chevy Chase left. We've heard all those. Say, "Oh, check out this guy, Andrew Dismukes. He does sketches that are kind of like blank." Like, what would you say?
Do you remember that kid in high school who wasn't the cool kid, but everybody sort of messed with him? Everybody sort of got along with him. That's Andrew Dismukes' humor, and that's Andrew Dismukes, I think, in a nutshell. He's got this real, he definitely feels like he would fit in with the cool kids, yet he definitely has this not cool kid vibe to him that I absolutely love. I think in a way we have he's like he's like Andy Samberg if Samberg was toned down 15%. That's how I feel about Andrew Dismukes. He's just got this chill vibe of his comedy, but this super confidence to it that's really hard to explain.
I think that's a great way to put it. I mean, were you that kid in high school, Andrew?
I like to think so, but probably not. I was probably the cool kid, toned down 70%.
So I'm seeing a comment from Ajax in the chat that says, "I didn't like him at first. Now I love him. He grew on me and won me over." And so I think if you're a week to week watcher of SNL and you really get invested, it's fun to see those pops from people because early on in people's career, you kind of know, we know the one and done all too well. So if you don't see someone make that pop early, you kind of get a little nervous. I know there was some chatter about, Ashley Padilla. She got her update cut and then she was shut out that week. And now we saw more of her. So we got her finally leading a 10-1. But we're looking back right now, season 46. I think this is the hardest season of SNL, maybe in history, to break out in. So speaking of breakouts, I mean, Dismukes did have one. So on the screen right now, I have the appearances in the first 6 weeks. I did this season to compare it to the current season because it was an election year. You think long cold opens. So season 46, average cold open length, 10 minutes 50. That is long. This season, it's long as well, but it was 8 minutes 43 seconds. So 2 minutes, 7 seconds on average, shorter than season 46, where we had Alec Baldwin, Maya Rudolph, and of course, Jim Carrey, Biden, and the Beck Bennett, Pence. So not only that, Haskell, but there was a pandemic going on. So smaller sketches, less live material. So looking back now, we see Andrew Dismukes, 6 appearances through 6 episodes. Lauren Holt, 9. Punky Johnson, 7. Their screen time, Dismukes, 3 minutes, 27 seconds. Lauren Holt, 6 minutes, 28. So she was the leader in appearances and screen time, and she ended up being the one and done of that class. And Punky Johnson and her 7 appearances, 4 minutes, 40. So if we go back in time, Andrew, and look at season 46, we have 3 new people and an already huge cast. There's 20 people in the cast. Keep in mind, we had no A.D. Bryant, really, no Cecily, really. Keenan and Chris Redd were kind of in and out because they were filming Keenan for NBC. So there are 2 weeks that we didn't really have them. So there was some room for that big of a cast. So similar size ultimately to the 17 we have today. But do you remember your first takes of these 3, Dismukes, Lauren Holt, and Punky?
Yeah, it's so incredible watching Andrew Dismukes having the least appearances there. It's like in the NHL, they say you can't win the Stanley Cup before Thanksgiving, but you can lose it. But Dismukes just kind of hung around for that first stretch of the show. I do remember, and I don't want to sound like the guy who was in on this early, but I remembered liking Dismukes early on simply because he has that vibe where I feel like he was really good at getting his humor and his style across in 1 or 2 lines. And when you look at the numbers, 7 seconds, 6 seconds, another 7 seconds, another 7 seconds. That's pretty much all. He was getting 1 or 2 lines and yet he was so good at that delivery. Like, he's come such a long way, but so much of what he does was there from the beginning that I remember liking him and wanting to see more of him from the beginning. I remember being shocked that Lauren Holt, there were comparisons to A.D. Bryant, and when she gets cast in a season where A.D. Bryant's not expected to be around at the beginning of the season, you think like, oh, there's an opening for her. And if you look, 9 appearances in those first 5 episodes, like, there was an opportunity for her. I remember being disappointed later in the season when she started to get shut out. And I just loved Punky, man. I did. I liked her stand-up. I think a lot of us here at SNN were beating that drum for a lot of seasons. Like, Punky's going to break out. Punky's going to break out. I think it was Punky rightfully stuck around for a few seasons. But look at that, even 7 appearances in those first couple episodes, but just never clicked in a way where you feel like I'm watching one of the next breakout stars.
Yeah, looking back when Punky's, rookie campaign ended, it was the stats did point to like, oh, this is going to be somebody who we never really saw their full potential, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were not brought back. And then she was, and then was again, and then was again, and then after season 49, that was the end of her career. So I had SNL anyway. So we have, I had the career stats on Punky, but for Lauren Holt, yeah, it was one of the people who did kind of get those utility roles. Like Haskell says, it might have been a A.D. Bryant stand-in, but made the first live appearance of the 3. It was in the that name change sketch they did with Rachel Brosnahan, and they brought it back for the premiere with Chris Rock, and she was Irma Gerd next to Ego Wodom's Edith Puthie. So we got a quick laugh from Lauren Holt, where the other appearances from our rookies were Dismukes just kind of walking on stage and right off as a Buffalo Wild Wings, another random season 46 to 50 Bill Burr comparison, and it's going to see some more of those. But he played like the delivery guy. He was the masked cameraman for the Drew Barrymore show with Chloe Fineman doing her Barrymore impression, and so that was their first episode. Punky really, I thought, had a decent breakout in that Bill Burr show, The Woke Mafia. Because Bill Burr is back in the mafia, and now there's a black woman in the mafia. And he's like, what the hell is going on? All these things, and they're talking about pronouns, and they're talking about their feelings, and he's like, we kill people. This is the mob, and and then eventually Punky Johnson stands up and shoots and kills Kyle Mooney. So I thought that for Punky, she had the first kind of like, oh, that's one of the newbies that she was great. But I wonder. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wonder if there's a comp there too. Bill Burr being a stand-up guy, and I feel like he probably has an appreciation for stand-ups that made the show. So, potentially giving Punky that opportunity there. It also matches, Emil getting a little bit of a breakout in terms of appearance numbers in 6 sketches this week. Emil also having that stand-up background. I just wonder if there's a connection there with Bill Burr maybe as a host looking for performances and supporting performances from stand-ups as he's there for the week.
Yeah, I love tracing that thread, because anytime we get a little nugget of behind the scenes of when the host had influence on either performer or a sketch selection, or they had a hand in writing it, because ultimately, average, host X comes in the building and, they get to the table read and they have, a mountain of sketches to go through. They do sit down with them and kind of go through like, oh, which ones worked for you. So I think if you look at a host and how they affect the show, the pregame of it, it's the sketch selection. So of course, for Bill Burr, even just picking a piece that had, a good Punky moment helped her out. But if you look at this whole chart right here, you see Andrew Dismukes was the only one who had like an A roll of the first 6 shows. So you're seeing that, there's no episode 6, the Chappelle episode. All 3 rookies were shut out. There was a lot of shutouts that week, of course, long monologue, but still had no Cecily, no 80, but we had no Chris Reds, but then the 3 rookies were shut out. So 6 cast members right there were not in the night. But it was the Issa Rae episode with the Jack Flats. That was a sketch where it was lampooning the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Do you remember that sketch, Haskell?
I do. As you describing it, it's coming back to me, and it's funny that you mentioned as it's coming back to me. I remember it now being like one of our first extended looks at Dismukes.
I have a weird POV on that sketch because it was COVID, and that was supposed to be my wedding night, but I was a COVID wedding, so I had to push my wedding a year later. So we had a party in my mom's backyard, and late night, and then of course it's like maybe 2:30 in the morning. Get back, and I'm like, there was a new SNL tonight. I gotta watch it. So I hit play on the DVR and watched the whole show from that night. Usually, I like to watch it live, but in that case, it was a late night. And when you're, had a great time and been drinking all night, like, let's throw on a new SNL, Issa Rae and Justin Bieber, and then saw Dismukes kind of have his breakout moment. So we mentioned that this post-election show, all rookies shut out. How about season 50? Because as Haskell mentioned, we had a lot of Emil Joachim. We had the first A-roll sketch for Ashley Padilla. And we had all three rookies in the cold open, mentioned by name. How did you like that moment this week?
It was cool. I'm kind of a sucker whenever, we get the behind the scenes sort of like high school-ish aspect of SNL. Whenever the newbies or the rookies are referred to that way, I always get a kick out of that. Season 39 probably did that one of the best ways, and kind of poking fun at how many people they brought in that season. So I really liked them having to play that role of like, but they're the scapegoats. You can go after them. I thought that was a really good role for them. And it's just being able to be in a role like that in the cold open. I don't know about you. I always have that new cast member feel where it's like, no matter how good they are, no matter how funny they are in their prior SNL experience, every time I look at them, I just go like, it doesn't look like SNL when they're on the screen. These three cast members, especially, I made the joke earlier this year, they looked like three people that would be cast in a movie where there's like a fake SNL, and they're like three nondescript sketch actors. That's how I felt about them. But these little roles, like being in the cold open on such a big night, are the things that start to make these new cast members feel familiar to us. So I really appreciate them getting those roles.
And I think it was the perfect blend of the two things we're talking about right now, which was having that kind of rookie hazing energy. Haskell's kind of referencing the Tina Fey, right? The dancing in the
Yep.
monologue where we had Mike O'Brien, Brooks Wheelan, Noel Wells, John Milheiser, Kyle Mooney, and Beck Bennett. And I did some rookie debut stats after the premiere this year, and thinking about like looking at that group, that crop of rookies, and thinking like, okay, it's going to be Beck and Kyle. All right, that's going to be the people that we remember. So looking at now, and Keenan going left to right, that's Ashley Padilla, Jane Wickline, and Emil Joachim. So like shouting them out in a funny way, kind of reminding people that, hey, they're part of the cast too. But then after that, they all had decent nights. Jane Wickline's already had 2 update appearances, but so she didn't have a lot to do this night other than that trauma support group that she was briefly in. But Ashley and Emil had great nights. So I'm going to give you their stats through 6 weeks and kind of contrast them with how low the numbers were for Dismukes, Lauren Holt, and Punky. So far, Ashley Padilla, 11 appearances, 10 minutes, 19 seconds. Emil Joachim, 16 appearances. And just for reference, he has more appearances than the 3 promotions. So Longfellow has 14, Marcelo has 14, Devin has 12, Emil Joachim, 16 appearances. So you can look down the column there and see that most of them are brief, other than his update appearance and the Sex Rock CD sketch with Bill Burr this week. They're all under a minute, but he's doing that utility role. So that's great for a rookie to be kind of taking that away from a veteran who you'd expect to see. So he has 11 minutes, 22 seconds. And then Jane Wickline, 10 appearances, but the most screen time, 11 minutes, 49, again, mostly due to update. So Haskell, season 50 is coming around the corner, election year, huge spotlight on the show itself. Of course, on the cameos, Maya Rudolph's in the building. We know that going in. And then we see Dana, we see Andy Samberg. You might have been nervous for these rookies, but did you have any vibe going in and kind of like, how is this culture going to look in season 50?
Yeah, it's funny enough. I think Ashley Padilla has had, up until the last sketch of this last episode, was having the biggest trouble really connecting and finding a place. And if you asked me 6 weeks ago, or a little over 6 weeks ago, I probably would have told you I felt the strongest about her just from her background and her appearances. I thought, a stand-up and Emil Joachim can be hit or miss. I think some stand-ups, and I think what we're seeing with him, I think the nature of being a stand-up and punching things up always is I do wonder about the ability to walk into a room on writer's night, punch up a sketch with 1 or 2 lines, and get yourself a spot in that sketch because people are appreciative of you helping out. And then Jane Wickline, so hard to predict coming off of TikTok. How do you, what do we have for numbers on TikTok stars? Some, a season or 2 of Marcelo Hernandez. Like, talk about not having the data on that one. So I thought Ashley Padilla was going to have the strongest start, and I don't want to say she had the weakest, but she's had the toughest time. Emil has really started to take on some of those roles that I look at some of those roles and I just wonder, is Mikey tired? Is it just like something that would have gone to Mikey Day or somebody else, and they've just been at the show so long that they're like, I don't need to do something like that on a Saturday night. I don't need to be on screen for 13 seconds or 18 seconds. Emil can play that part. And Jane Wickline, guess what? They picked a TikTok star and put her on SNL. She went on Weekend Update, and her song blew up on TikTok. How interesting. That worked out pretty well for her. So going into it, I was a little nervous for these 3. Even though I'm a little surprised by Ashley Padilla, those numbers, if you just look at the raw appearances, 11, 16, and 10, they're strong. And I feel like if you say Jane Wickline, if you say Emil Joachim, you say Ashley Padilla, a lot of people who at least follow the show somewhat regularly aren't going like, who's that? I think they are recognizing them as like, oh, those are the new people, right? And I think that's a good place to be. The only place you don't want to be on SNL is the unknown, I think.
Yeah, and we definitely saw that with Luke Null and Aristotle, because I recently was talking about their side-by-sides, and, Aristotle, 15 minutes total, and Luke Null was not that much better. I can look it up. I think it was under 20, though. So seeing them all over 10 minutes in an election cycle in the biggest season of all time, just shout out to the rookies, because they have found their way. They might not have had the biggest moments, which is completely expected and shouldn't be held against them. But when they did have moments, like they made it to live. Like, they didn't get cut a dress. Like, that's the hugest thing for me is, okay, they're pushing material forward. They're getting along with the writers. That's a good sign. But to make it to the live show, I think, is the biggest hurdle in this so far, season 50, episode 1 through 6. So they're all above 10 minutes. I'll give a quick reminder, going into season 46, kind of, similar. We have, 1 male, 2 female additions to the cast, an already big cast. We have people complaining the cast is too big. When are we going to get more of, we have Chloe and Bowen now they're in their second year. We should see more of them. And of course, Kate, 80, Cecily, when they're all, at full steam ahead, how are they going to fit in? So looking at the side by side, you have, Andrew, 6 appearances, Emil, 16, Lauren Holt, 9, Jane Wickline, 10, Punky, 7, Ashley, 11. So right away, right there, you're seeing a huge difference. And the screen time, again, Andrew didn't hit 3 minutes 30. Emil hit over 11 minutes, like, triple that, more than triple that. So for a tough spot to be in, they've met the moment. As far as Ashley, let's talk about her last sketch real quick. So far in her over 10 minutes, 63% has been 10-1. So that's fair, rookie in the 10-1. She's getting sketch time, and she's a former groundling, so likes to do the live material maybe more than Emil, who got made into the PDD sketch, and he's made it a quick appearance in the Good Will Hunting sketch for pre-tapes. But so 60% of her time has been in those moments, and then she finally got hers in the sketch called "I Got One" about the 4 gorgeous dogs. So, Andrew, what did you make of that sketch live?
Yeah, I think you
First watch.
Just before that, I do think you hit on a good point though, of like her being in the live sketches. Like, if you're not getting in the pre-tapes and you're not on Weekend Update, it can be pretty daunting, especially we don't know all the inner workings, but if you think about, Mikey and Street are getting a sketch on each week, and it's probably going to go early in the show. If you're not getting on their sketch, there's one sketch down. So, the other kind of cast member or writers that are getting things on the show, it puts you in a weird spot. I think already though, in her limited time, we're starting to see the bones of what her sketches are going to be. I think she's already doing a great for somebody who's not of that age. She plays the middle-aged wife or the middle-aged mom really well. I think we're going to see a lot of that going forward. The sketch itself, although I find the premise kind of funny, I find it so hard to rate these 10-1 sketches, because you look at them and you go, I can see where this thing got torn up a little bit and had to get pieced back together at the last minute. So I thought the role was really good. Excuse me, even if the sketch wasn't great.
Also, tough spot to be to have your breakout piece be like, all right, you're gonna go. I know she brought it with her to the cast, but you're gonna go on your big break and you're gonna be intentionally not funny. That's a tough spot to be in. So looking at the 10-1, they average over the last 6 seasons 3 minutes 44, where like the first sketch is a 5-minute like tight 5. So you're already getting less time, as Haskell alluded to, that they are being cut up because they're hoping to fit in that last piece post second performance from the musical guest, and just kind of like get it on, get it out. Let's get to the good nights and let's go to the after party. So that last sketch is a tough breakout moment, but I was happy for her that she got it. You ready for 5 questions?
Let's do it.
All right. So this is a week that, one guest, it's all on you, buddy. So
I like the pressure. I like
it. Yeah. You're going to go first every question. All right. Question 1.
Attention are students. 2 students have just been expelled for fornicating inside a Mufasa costume.
That was the great Jay Farrow right there. Question 1. Keenan appeared on Weekend Update as Michael Che's neighbor Willie for the 10th time this week. Other than What Up With That was the character of DeAndre Cole. Which original character will he most be remembered for as the most tenured of all time?
It seems like it should be an easy question for somebody who's been on the show so long, but it's so tough because he has so many characters that have faded away when cast members leave. So I think Willie has now, not only does it have 10 appearances, but it has a long run. I think Willie has an opportunity. I'd like to say Lorenzo McIntosh, because I love that sketch. And I think people from that era love that sketch. But it's been so long, I don't know. But those would be the 2 that I would go with.
Yeah, Lorenzo McIntosh from the Scared Straight sketches. He did that 8 times. So What Up With That is his most prolific. There's been 13 of that. The one I thought of was Reese DeWatt. That was Cinema Classics. It's not really a great character piece because he's more of a vehicle to get to the material, and the game of the sketch is always lampooning an old movie. But Reese to what always gets some like really off the wall lines in those sketches. So I put that one up there. Jean K. Jean was, a throwback to, our younger years, seeing him as, the French artist. He did that 9 times. He's been in the last call with Sheila Sauvage. That's 9 times, but he's, always a supporter right there. And then, the Californian, same thing, 8 times there. And then I would say Darnell Hayes, Black Jeopardy. I think people will remember that one big time because that's just such a popular concept. Anything else from Keenan that you can think of?
No, I did have Reese DeWitt on my list, but the same reason I didn't include him is what you talked about. It just, it's the lack of interaction with that sort of stuff. I also think if I can bend the rules a little bit, if you just take out I think his Steve Harvey, I know we're doing original characters, not impressions, but I do think his Steve Harvey will probably be something that people remember as his own little character.
Agreed. Ken is trolling me in the comments by saying Treese because I've had rants on the show about Treese Henderson. And we got Scary Gary Lomas in the comments as well. Question 2.
I sent a bottle of sparkling apple juice to your house. Did you get it?
Since season 35, we've seen 42 episodes hosted by stand-up comics, 19 making their first hosting appearance in that span. What stand-up would be the best choice to host next?
Well, I do know that a local New England stand-up did get a vote from the SNL experts that who should host in season 50. And Andrew Haskell did get that vote. But people don't know that wasn't my vote. Somebody else voted for that. But in a serious sense, think about stand-ups that should host. I see Nikki Glazer coming in. That would be a good one. I went with Dan Soder. I think he's so good with his voices and his impressions. I think he would just meld right into an episode of SNL. I think he's hilarious. So I would love to see Dan Soder host.
Also auditioned for SNL, did not make it. So there's been some chatter before. He's in that Shane Gillis circle. So
yeah,
a lot of podcasts. So Shane did get cast. We all know what happened after that. But Dan Soder did not. I'm seeing the comments along with Nikki Glazer, Tom Segura, Mark Normand. He's a favorite of mine. I listen to his podcast, Tuesday the Stories with Joe List every week. I'm a patron of that
Joe
show.
List, another local Massachusetts guy, by the way.
Absolutely. So we've seen it succeed, and I'll kind of rule out the alumni. Of course, Chris Rock, is one of those guys who I'm always down for, but friend of the show. So it's fun when we got a Bill Burr, we got a Nate Bargatze, somebody who has a career completely absent of SNL, making their debut. Gerard Carmichael, of course, Amy Schumer got huge and then hosted it 3 times. So I definitely would like more of it, and I'm sure you're going to say yes, but are you kind of more psyched when there's a stand-up on the show?
I usually am, yeah. I think, here's the thing, the monologues from a stand-up used to be white hot, right? When you saw a stand-up come out, they were already holding their microphone. There was just an excitement to it. I don't know, the vibes have been a little bit different lately, and I don't know, I can't pinpoint exactly what it is. I don't know if now the fans are smart enough to know that it's going to be a long monologue. Don't burn so bright right away. I don't know if there's interference on what they're doing with the monologues. That, they seem very disjointed now, where they're jumping around to a lot of different points. I think that hurt Bill Burr a little bit this week with, I think he very clearly didn't want to talk about the election. And I think somebody said, it's SNL after the election, you have to say something about it. So he threw in a couple jokes. So I still have that thing where if there's a stand-up hosting SNL, I'm going to get excited. I just think the last couple stand-up monologues do not hit the way they used to. You used to get some great freaking material and some really pushing the boundaries material from those monologues. and we don't quite get that as much right now. And maybe too, it might be that stand-up is so accessible now that it's really hard to hide. You know, there's a lot of stand-up being done in the monologues where people are like, I saw that. I've seen him do that bit. Or he doesn't have the chance to really work out material, because where are these guys going to truly work out material where people aren't like just giving them crazy positive feedback because they're seeing a huge celebrity?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you say that about late night shows too. Like, you're not going to do new on SNL. It's like you're going to do material that works to a lot of different demographic, because you're literally doing stand up to America, not just the room. So Shane Gillis, like, he did a lot of his last special was in there, and some of his new material as well. I was at the Rami Youssef show, and now looking back, I wish I knew, or I asked after the show, like, if they had the stand-up clock, because the clock is so key to do, like, oh, you're doing 5, you're doing 6, you're doing 7, or they might just say, hey, I whittled down a 15-minute set. I'm going to do it at dress, and then maybe you get some feedback of, oh, you're going to cut that bit, which is insane ask of a stand-up to be like, okay, your rhythm is now shit because you're going to do this bit into that bit, no transition. So I'm interested if they have the stand-up clock on the stage.
I wonder if they do an old school light from the back. And I don't know if only stand-up comics will get that joke, but like just somebody flashing their phone, you got 1 minute left. But the way it's you talking about their stand-up getting cut up or things like that, or after dress, it does remind me. Have you ever heard the Louis C.K. told the story once of wanting like 15 minutes for his monologue or some crazy number, and Lorne telling him, you can't have that much time. So he cuts his stuff down. And then after dress, they go in for the meeting. And whoever it was timing the show told Lorne that they were 1 minute short or 2 minutes short, some small amount short. And Louis jumped right up and was like, oh, give me that time. I'll do it in the monologue. Give me that time. And he said, Lorne just looked at him and went, calm down. As a way to say, like, I experience this every week. I don't need you jumping. I'm not giving you that time. So I just think that was a funny story that I don't remember where he told that story, but I remember hearing it years ago.
On the SNN socials, we're going to be putting out all the stand-up monologue times since season 40. So look for that this week, because we've had, a good amount, including 6 Mulaney's. So we had one last week, which, I think Mulaney's definitely had stronger monologues, and Bill Burr's last time was stronger. To Haskell's point about stand-up energy, it's definitely exciting because they're the risk takers, because they're the ones who do that. They're solo microphone to an audience. When they bomb, they bomb. When they succeed, they succeed. So of course, I figured going into this monologue, Bill Burr is going to say something that's going to get him in trouble, and that's kind of his game. Much like Chappelle. And in this case, I did feel like Mulaney's last week and Burr this week was a case of like off rhythm. But let's go to question 3.
There was a rebel village 5 clicks down the road. Word came down from top brass. Make it disappear.
Bill Burr's episode featured 3 Boston-related sketches. Other than New York City, what other American city's culture is ripe for comedy?
All right, starting off, I mean, Boston, clearly, that's teeing it up an easy answer right there. And obviously, we're both from the area. We both get it. From the accent, to the attitude, to the anger, to the driving, to all of it, to the obsession with sports is easy. But my second one is, I'm still a sucker. Maybe it's because I'm not from that area, and I've only been out to that area a few times. I love anything Chicago. I love the Chicago accent. I love their obsession with sausages and brats and all that sort of stuff. So I think Chicago's really good. And we got to see a little bit this year, actually. I lived in Minneapolis for a little bit. I think that Midwestern Minnesota nice is a great fodder for comedy as well. Anything that like Midwest, I think, is really fun. Maybe Texas, that area will come back around. I think we kind of exhausted a lot of that in the George Bush years. That kind of using the Texas and the American South as kind of that that punching bag. But if you had to give me the T-ball answer is Boston, but if I really had to answer, I'd go Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago, we got, we've had that from the comedians come out of there. Of course, Boston. I mean, there's just so many comedians that come out of Boston and the comedy scene through Louis C.K., Patrice O'Neill. It was just so huge and still is. A lot of comics will say that the Wilbur is one of the best rooms that they've ever played. Every stand-up basically I've seen in the theater has been at the Wilbur in Boston. And of course, my heart's there because I host a podcast every week and desperately try to hide the accent. But, you hear it on TV, you're like, oh, people love it. So I would say that. And
embrace it, kid. Embrace it.
I've been told that. And this is my whole hang up is that I have a crazy thick accent in my everyday life. But when you put a microphone in front of you, you go into like school mode where you're like giving a presentation and you just like you try to drop it as much as possible. But when you see someone like Bill Burr do it, you're like, oh yeah, like it's not so bad, right? Yeah, people like it, So
I don't even get I didn't get the Boston accent. I have like dumb Taunton accent. I got like the Southern Massachusetts accent. We just like don't say anything right, and we still pronounce our R's.
Hit the Taunton Fairgrounds kid. But there was just so many. I mean, I guess, the sexiest man alive was named John Krasinski. He's a Newton kid, but, close enough, right? So, yeah, that. And I just real quick, Haskell mentioned Texas, and I've spent some time in Austin, and I think that city needs to be made fun of because much like Nashville, it's full of transplants, and it's just a city that doesn't know what it is. So I feel like if you've ever been to Austin, Texas, it's kind of like, oh, is this like the Southern LA because no one's from here and there's like a nightlife and you forget like, oh, I'm in Texas right now. So let's go to question 4.
Let's see what you wagered. Suck it, Trebek.
All right, we're doing a little quick round of Marry, F, Kill. If you know that game, I don't have to say what that means. We're going to do Marry, F, Kill, game show sketches, infomercial sketches, and restaurant sketches. These are 3 of the most prolific SNL crutches, for better, for worse. They do one of those 3 categories. You're going to see one a week. So I want to ask somebody who knows sketch pretty well. And game show, infomercial, and restaurant.
All right, we're gonna marry game shows because the best days are amazing, and the best game show sketches are amazing. And then there's gonna be ones that stink. And as 2 married guys, we can tell you there's gonna be tough days, But you gotta go through it every day. You gotta be there supporting, and that's what we gotta be with game show sketches. I mean, I would love to see the longest stretch SNL's ever had without a game show sketch. I would wonder what the stats are, at least in the modern era, I would say. But you get so much out of game show sketches. They can go in so many different directions. I'm marrying them. I'm gonna F infomercials. We're gonna do it. We're gonna have some fun. But I'm not gonna call you in the morning. I'm not going to check in on you. I'm not going to see how you're doing because usually there's going to be 6 or 7 that blow your mind. You're like, it's incredible. I wish I married that one. But for the most part, it's going to be quick, easy, done, good laugh. We're out of here. Just like a night with Andrew Haskell. And I'm going to kill restaurant sketches. I don't think they're inherently bad. I just wonder how many good restaurant sketches also could have been done not in a restaurant, could have been done at a family table or other settings. I don't think there's inherently an energy or something specifically SNL about a restaurant sketch the way I do about, a parody commercial or especially a game show.
I had the same 3 myself, and Ken in the chat said, this infomercial time with talk show, or how close does it tie in? I mean, the infomercial is great because you are lampooning a thing. So the game of the sketch is set up for you, much like a game show is. But the restaurant crutch is, I think you nailed it right there, Haskell. It's just, oh, where do people gather? And when it's, I can reference chicken fongers if I dare, but that sketch got shredded. But at least it was making a commentary on like the wait staff. It was going for something about, oh, we've all had our order taken wrong, or had a weird waitress or something about that. They did the Ariana DeBose like the kitchen sketch, like referencing things that are real life are great. It just seems like it is maybe a crutch of, oh, let's get two couples together. What do? They go on double dates and let's explore something. So it's a little bit more flimsy, but I'm not going to hold it against it because it is a way just to set off a sketch. But I threw that in there over talk shows because I don't want to conflate it with game shows. And I just thought that we've seen a bunch of them recently, including Ashley Padilla's two big vehicles, which was Tableside Guac with Keaton, and then this 10-1 last week. So,
and those two sketches kind of show you that first one, Tableside Guac, makes sense at a restaurant. You needed a stranger coming up to the group like that.
right.
You could have set that elsewhere. The Ashley Padilla joke one doesn't really have to be in a restaurant. That could be in a backyard. That could be a dinner. That can be in a lot of different places. And that's why I don't think restaurant sketches have that same kind of identity.
Agreed. And we did have the bald men sketch this week with Bill Burr. And it was funny because you see Mikey and Sarah on a first date, and they referenced that kind of idea we're hinting at of, wow, nothing weird has happened yet. As if to say to the audience that when you're on a date, people watching and you're having a good time, that you're going to be commenting on things in the restaurant. So they kind of alluded to that. They didn't go for that because, of course, it blew up into a complete escapade of bald men singing about being bald in a musical, but at least it did hint at that. So if you put that in the category of restaurant sketch, that would be an A for me. Question 5.
My name's Amber. I got hepatitis B, a mad case of bed bugs, and I'm rocking one leg. But nobody knows because that's my secret, bitch.
All right, so we all can have our post-mortems about the election, but let's talk about it for SNL. Officially entering the post-election phase of the season 50, the golden season. What are you looking for as a viewer and a fan and a podcast? Like, what are you looking for now? We can finally say we don't have to do this anymore if we don't want to. Of course, the show will comment, but we don't have to, which I think the show, of course, had to comment week to week on the race that was 2024 presidential election. Now that we don't, what do you want from this show for 14 more episodes?
Yeah, I just be SNL. Don't feel like we had for that long stretch where you have to be the Donald Trump show. You do the cold open that makes the most sense for that week, not just what you think is going to get that little bump. It's the same problem we talked about at the top of this episode. The weeks go by, so much happens that by the time you comment on it in the cold open, it's just this running list of everything that happened. Be more focused in your cold opens than you were the last Trump administration. Be SNL. I know some people wanted season 50 to be this like total mold breaking thing of like only all-star hosts and cameos galore. I don't want that. I want, again, Jane Wickline to still be able to be Jane Wickline. I want Longfellow and Marcello and Devin Walker to be able to increase their screen time by just having regular episodes of SNL. If I could just get a little nugget because it is season 50, I wouldn't mind. I would not be opposed to seeing little things. I know they had Sandberg in the building already, but when we got an SNL digital short, that was great. If Dana Carvey is going to be in the building, I wouldn't, if his, whatever he was contracted to do to come back, if that was up after this week and they just used him one last time, that would make sense. But if he is going to be around it all again, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Church Lady real quick. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of time dedicated each episode, not even each episode, maybe every couple weeks, to seeing something from the 50 years of SNL coming back. Maybe, Seth comes back to jump in at the Weekend Update table, or something like that. I wouldn't mind seeing that over the next, dozen or so episodes before we wrap up this 50th season.
Agreed. That was kind of my rant. We did a pre-show before the premiere. John and I and Amanda, and I was just like fired up. I'm like, season 50. I know we're getting politics, but just like Haskell just said, just be SNL, be unapologetic, unashamed. Give me the Easter eggs for the super fans, but just go classic. If that means cameos, then I'm all for it. If it doesn't mean it, then just be what makes a show great. And seeing in the comments, Chris said, more evergreen sketches that can stand the test of time no matter what's trending. Because I think when we look back, we mentioned the Boston Teens, or we mentioned Debbie Downer, or What Up With That, or things that are uniquely SNL that you can watch any year and just go like, oh, that's either very SNL or it's still relevant. Or it's even better because we're seeing, sketches that are, they might be funny that week and placate the host, which I think is great to suit them, and people can have a viral moment. Have no problem with that. But when you have these kind of sketches, I mean, even the Dismukes, Hey Soul Sister, like you're calling back something, and the concept itself, like they could have done any song. It's sketch comedy. You're making a stance or poking fun at something that, I wouldn't have thought of that. So SNL, who better to do that than them? So that wraps up 5 questions. Let's wrap up the show as well by looking up the updated power rankings. So there's a lot of movement this week for a unique show. So let's look at how it falls right now. SNL power rankings, week number 6. So, of course, Bowen Yang comes back big, had 110 this week. He's now averaging a 93.8. He's number 1. As a reminder, screen time, appearances, recurring characters, prime time, saying live from New York, everything goes into one number to make it digestible. Colin Jost, almost unfair. I want your take, Haskell, real quick, because I do this stat every week. It's my baby. I have a real baby now, but SNL power rankings is something I've been doing for so long and tinkering with. When I see Colin Jost all the time, I almost feel like a By The Numbers fan by saying like, oh, like why is Jost number 2? But he gets so much screen time that he almost overrides the stat. What do you think about Colin Jost always being like the number 1 screen time getter on average? He's an update host.
Well, as somebody who drafted Colin Jost in our SNN fantasy draft this year, I really wish we went by the power rankings for that, because that would help me out a lot. I think he's carved out this really good position for himself as being a little bit more of the go-to guy for these correspondents. I think he's created such a rapport with them in a way that maybe Seth Meyers did, that it's a little odd that he's so far ahead of Michael Che. He's so far ahead of some character, people that have characters and are getting some real screen time in the show and anchoring sketches. But I think if you went around and asked, 100 random people that are just somewhat aware of SNL right now, and you said, who's on SNL? I think you would get a lot of people answering Colin Jost. So therefore, the number kind of makes sense.
So he's at an 82.0 average. So if you look at the chart on the screen, you're going to see all green for Colin Jost. Doesn't dip. Where Michael Che has had peaks and valleys, and he always does. There's, so everyone is saying, like, why does he get more screen time? It's like Michael Che does on occasion get more than Colin Jost. Of course, this week Colin had one more appearance. Didn't move the needle really though. Like he gets the correspondence next to him way more often, and also gets way more jokes. So that's why it happens. So number 3, James Austin Johnson, 75.8, just logged back-to-back weeks in the 90s. So huge for him. And number 4, Andrew Dismukes, who was always teetering. Once he got hot, was always around like 9, 10, 11, was around there. And everyone in Dismukes Nation was celebrating that. He's cracking the top 10. He's making his ways. He's getting there. Well, look at us now. Andrew Dismukes, number 4, 69.5 with his biggest week of the season. He's at a 69.5. Keenan right behind him after his biggest week in years, 69.2, tied with Heidi Gardner. So we have our first legit tie of the season at number 5 with Heidi Gardner, 69.2. Number 7, Sarah Sherman, 65.8. Ego Wodum with a huge week again after the Keaton episode, 64.0. Mikey Day's at number 9. He won the Triple Crown last year, almost, other than Joe's getting the screen time. Actually, Heidi got the most appearances. So Mikey Day won the season, but did not win the categories. So he's at a 59.4. Michael Che, number 10, 52.7. Number 11, Marcelo, who had a great week, number 2, but after that has not done a ton to get up in the board. He's at a 50.1. Chloe Feynman, of course, logging a 0. Kind of tanked the average right there. 48.2. Michael Longfellow, respectable, number 13, 46.3. Devin Walker, who had 2 good weeks to start the season, and ever since has not really had a great piece, but did have the dad phone call this week. Got a lot of screen time, got an A-roll. He wasn't just, appearing as Eric Adams at the subway. So he's at a 38.7. Now we have our 3 rookies, of course, at the bottom, 15, 16, 17. That's Emil, Jane, and Ashley. Emil, 36.8. Jane, 33.2. And Ashley Padilla, 26.0. Haskell, first time after all these years on By the Numbers. You can look at the power rankings, brother.
Dude, I think the biggest thing we're seeing right now, 3, 4, I think we're seeing a changing of the guard on who is quarterbacking this show, at least from the male side. Keenan is a thing all to his own. Obviously, Bowen's having a great year, but I do think James Austin Johnson and Andrew Dismukes they're really starting to put their stamp on the show from a performance standpoint, from a writing standpoint, from just an overall vibe standpoint. I think those will be the 2 to watch the rest of this year to really start to wonder, could they go on a run, especially James Austin Johnson, and we know why. Could we see James Austin Johnson end this season at number 1? I think there's a really, really good possibility that could happen.
Yeah, that's what John was asking me last week, and I think no, because I don't think Jadge gets enough A rolls outside the cold opens, unfortunately. But I think he's almost a lock to be top 5, if not top 3. And this is a stat that I pulled on Saturday, seeing that infomercial sketch with the with Snakeskin, the rock band. It was the 5th live sketch of the year that featured only cast from 46 to 50. So I kind of was thinking is this finally the new era we've been talking about since SNL stats started? And 46 was having, it's a passing of the torch. It's these stars leaving and newbies coming in. And this is a take I actually had. I want to get your take, Haskell, is on the 46 versus 50 rookies. I was thinking about it today, making getting the stats together. And I kind of had this thought, my theory, absent of COVID and election and all that, did Mikey, Ego, and Heidi wait in the wings so long behind in the shadow of Cecily, 80, Kate, throw Pete in there if you want, that they never became stars, that now they are almost permanently supporting team players?
Are
Dismukes and Jadge and Sarah can have the opportunity that they didn't have?
It's almost like what Cecily and Kate and things did to Taron Killam. Taron Killam to me is the poster child of what you just described. I don't know. It would be really hard for me to say that Heidi Gardner never became a star on SNL. I think she did. I think she is still very much one of the top stars on the show right now. Mikey Day's obviously had a fantastic career. Would they have maybe even had, could we be talking about Heidi Gardner having a massive SNL career if Kate and Cecily had left maybe a little bit sooner? Possibly, but I have to stop short of saying that Heidi Gardner hasn't had a fantastic career and hasn't been the star cast member at least the last 2 seasons.
I mean, fully agree. Proud card carrying member of the Heidi fan club, but I think that her talents are so diverse. We knew her on Update. I was doing I did the Mulaney season 43 episode, its first one, and I was doing that episode and seeing Bailey Gismert, and I was like, this is so funny. Like those recurring sketches, you kind of forget where they came from because you know the beats, and seeing that, like, she's a star. And so to your point about if the 3 leading ladies had left a little earlier, then I think we could be talking about Heidi Gardner as a Kate 80 Cecily now. And she is stat wise. I just mean that, like, breaking through and taking the cast and running with it. I don't think anyone is right now except Bowen from the eye test for like the casuals and the articles written about the show. Us diehards, we know that Heidi is upper echelon. So we see that in the stats and we see that with our eyes and love her shit on the show. So, but seeing Andrew at number 4, Judge at number 3, I know it's Trump heavy, and seeing the recently promoted cast rising up the way they have been, in spite of the rookies getting time, in spite of the cameos. Is it just becoming like a Chloe Fineman? I mean, she just kind of never broke through as a woman on the cast in the shadow of those 3 titans right there.
Yeah, Feynman is one that you really have to question. And I do wonder, like, I never really thought I'd see Mikey Day Mikey Day at Night's a big one. I do wonder if he's at a point now where he's been passed over. I think some of the things that James Austin Johnson is doing, especially, are roles that would have went to Mikey Day before. So yeah, I do think that SNL is really weird in that way, that with the exception of these cast members that, Cecily, Kate, Beck, who stayed for such a long time, you kind of them staying for so long kind of made you forget that, like, oh yeah, a lot of people have short runs on SNL or medium runs on SNL that just when you start to get familiar with them, they're gone. I think
I would say Alex Moffat and Melissa.
And even Chris Redd to a degree. Like, I feel like I feel like there was a missing chapter of SNL that was built around Taran Killam and Jay Farrow and Vanessa Bayer that kind of got cut short. I feel like there's a Mikey Day, Heidi Gardner, Alex Moffat, Chris Redd version of SNL that also kind of got cut short. We never got to see what their version of the show looked like because it was always the tail end of Cecily and Kate's SNL. And then by the time that wrapped up, Moffat and Chris Redd and Melissa Villasenor were gone. And now you have now it's Dismukes' SNL. So I always think that's always weird that, like, just when you think like it's somebody's time on the show, usually that means they're also starting to think about their exit strategy as well, as weird as that is to say.
That's also a big reason that I started the stat, was because I didn't want to favor certain aspects. It was about kind of just building the SNL world and seeing like what came out, because there's so many ways to succeed. You can be an update star, you can be a live sketch star, like I believe, like, Alex Moffat was and Melissa was. I mean, not a star, but a regular sketch player. And then it was also like a Chris Redd, Pete Davidson, who would get like a role upon a role and pre-tapes. and as well as Kyle Mooney when he got his time. But like then you'd have like a Beck Bennett and a Kate McKinnon who would do everything. Of course, Keenan is everything. But I want to look up like just a quick comparison, like Melissa Villasenor from season 43 till now, career average power ranking 32.64. That would put her at right below Jane Wickline. I know it's 6 episodes in for her career, but that would put her at the bottom of this cast following an election cycle. So you see someone like Melissa, who we know and love because we kind of just got to know her, like Haskell said. Whereas like a Beck Bennett, like let me pull his average real quick, because Beck is a fascinating one. He got a ton of voice work, has a comp to like JJ, but like could do characters, impressions, everything. Like his average from that time span, 79.64. Like Beck Bennett would be 4th place right now in this cast if you took his whole career just from season 43. So, I'm leaving out his early years, which would have been lower. So seeing that over time is what fascinates me, and coming in at SNL at the right time, very sports. Like it's very much, okay, well, they already have a right fielder. So like you might play first base, you might DH, and like you have to wait for them to like leave the team to get your time. Is so much of this past era of SNL to have, hey, I bring all the same intangibles, but like, oh, there's someone ahead of you. Final thoughts, Haskell?
Yeah, and it's also this rotating cycle of like, Heidi got so much of her early time on Weekend Update, and then isn't a huge Weekend Update force the last few seasons. It's that rotating cycle of where you get your roles from. And I think probably a little bit more than it used to be. I think it's a little bit less cutthroat than it used to be. That's why you're seeing like Melissa Villasenor would have been so much lower on this cast. Like I think there are people stepping aside and creating roles for other people, which is obviously great. I don't want anybody to be cast on SNL, get their dream job, and then have a crap experience. But the sports aspect is the best way to. That's why they say SNL's, comedy's live sport. It's. I think once you start viewing it in that sense, it almost becomes the only way to view it. That's what this podcast, this whole network is about. Like once you start looking at those inner workings like that, there's really no other way to look at it, because you can't shut that off. You can't not know what's going on behind the scenes anymore. So just incredible to see so much change this year on such a historic season.
Comedy is subjective, but the numbers don't lie. So that's SNL by the numbers, SNL stats. Like Haskell just said, this is why we're here. This is why we're here. All right. So moving on, we have Charlie XCX in a double duty role, first of the season. Who are you betting on this week before we say goodnight?
Ah, man. I don't want to like beat a dead horse. I think it's going to be a big Dismukes week. There's something about the pairing of Charlie XCX and Dismukes, and then somebody we haven't mentioned at all. I don't think we mentioned her at all tonight. I think it could also be a big Sarah Sherman week, and
I could see that.
I think that's somebody I'm in on Sarah Sherman, as Big Joe Murray here on Boston Radio would say.
98.5. Okay, so I think John made a good point that it could be similar to the Dua Lipa night. Of course, Dua Lipa, pop star, not an actress. Same with Charlie, but has a big fan base. Getting this opportunity on SNL, you might want to go easy on them because it is this post first phase of the show. Let's just have some fun, not put them into a role that they can't handle. And looking back at Dua Lipa's time, I have done stats on with and without musical performances to kind of even out the double duty. Dua Lipa, 16 minutes. So very lightly used in sketch. A lot of B-rolls, a lot of quick in sketches, like the thinking of the Keenan OBGYN sketch. where like you didn't really need Dua Lipa there at all, but like give her a couple lines. They had like a news sketch that she was like, did like the Drake versus Kendrick Lamar thing just to kind of throw her a bone, but like didn't have a character or really anything tough to do. So I'm hoping for more, but I would understand if it's a cast-heavy episode. And who wouldn't love a cast-heavy episode? You agree?
Yeah, I think especially with this cast and trying to see as we looked at those power rankings, I think we all have a few people towards the bottom of that list that we'd like to see kind of climb up it a little bit. So, you say like, oh, sometimes you feel like, oh, the host wasn't in it a ton. Sometimes that's a negative or it's seen as a negative, but I don't think so. Maybe that's just the type of episode you need every couple of weeks is a really cast heavy episode. And maybe the opportunity for some of these cast members to have their kind of signature stuff. Maybe we don't just get a lot of Sarah Sherman. Maybe we get some, Sarah Squirm stuff. Maybe some of these newer cast members get to show us what their actual brand is outside of just anchoring a sketch.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get a PDD. I wouldn't be surprised if overall we have a heavier pre-tape night. So far we've had on average 1.8 pre-tapes. It's basically been 2 a show, except the Gene Smart one. The Dismukes baseball one got cut, so we had 1 that night. So I feel like they, treat those kind of hosts with kid gloves and say, "Oh, let's just lock in a good performance on tape, and then we can run it when we have to." Because it is a tough job to be ready for your singing your last big single, and then all of a sudden you're wearing like a crazy costume. Right before it, I should say, prior to update. So I'm looking forward to that, and we've only seen 1 PDD, so I think this is the week to see a PDD. So Haskell, unreal to have you on By the Numbers after all these years. Still crazy after all these years. Thanksgiving coming up, thinking of Paul Simon dressed as a turkey, singing that song. So what do you have coming up on this podcast and elsewhere?
Wow, man, the most Boston episode of By the Numbers put together. So fun. Thank you for having me. I will be back coming up with some podcast stuff coming up soon. I don't think we have anything locked in right now, but to all my SNN fans in the New England area, all of you that got our Boston references throughout this episode, follow me on social media, Andrew E. Haskell. I got stand-up all over New England. I'm at the Rhode Island Comedy Connection semi-regularly now, which is a really fun time. Love to see you guys there. Got some shows up in Boston coming up. So Andrew E. Haskell on all social media and come out to a show.
Thank you so much, Haskell. You can follow me at SNL Mike Murray. Of course, follow our Instagram and everywhere else to see some great stats and everything else. Coming up, we have another everything you need to know about SNL. So if you looked the history at the top of the show, a lot of things I mentioned have been covered on that series. It's something that who else but us could do. And all the praise to John and James and everyone else putting those together because they are fantastic. And if you don't have the time to watch all those shows or can't find them, that's your best bet because you can really understand the show and I think appreciate, and it makes the show better. So go check that out. There's a new one dropping tomorrow. Of course, Saturday night, 1:10 a.m. Eastern, Hot Take Show with John Schneider, following Charlie XCX ×2, double duty, and Roundtable. And I'll be back here next Wednesday for By the Numbers. We are a presentation of LateNighter.com, as always, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.